So through martial art, I was exposed or lucky where I found out that I could sense things that other people couldn't. And they were not outside, I would say, scientific realm. It's just ability to observe and being aware. And you would rely more on your feelings of the wind, as the people are moving about. You're listening, you become more audio spatially acute as well. It's something more to that. And that's what drove me to explore more. And of course, people who do extraordinary jobs in extraordinary environments, astronauts, here actually is an epicenter for UFO experts, not necessarily the activity, but I grew up with the knowing that it exists. We're human, so we do misinformation or misinterpret and also make our own judgment. And as we all grow up with our own wants and needs or what habits that we don't want to change, there was a host of pilots that did not want to accept Airbus. And there were those pilots who, would embrace, especially a new generation, would be very interested in flying Airbus. And hence we had aircraft crash nearly every week, commercial flight, which is horrific because of that. And some of them were tragic and some of them were incidents. And there were many more incidents, and pilots were afraid to talk about this because so the discussions in the pubs and behind start taking place, and the words start getting out saying it's not the pilot error. And the problem was the pilots were underreporting the problem. They did not know what was happening in a way. They understood, but they couldn't explicate correctly. But also they couldn't articulate what was the problem because they couldn't fault themselves and they couldn't fault the aircraft. And I understood that what we have in cognitive engineering books saying of how we think and how we make decisions is actually not at all like that. We're not following decision tree. And then the ghost in the cockpit started to disappear in a way because they started to understand what they were processing, what they were missing, and we could unravel the puzzle. These people choose this job because it is that, because of this novelty, because of challenges, because they could learn a lot, because they can operate novel technology. Actually, novel, not everything in space. Some of it is very archaic because it's reliable. But the circumstances and technology surrounding it, or people who are thinking forward and contemplating of potential scenarios that may go wrong, is what on your mind all the time. Such as with pilots as well. They always consider. So all engineers and all the pilots and all the mission control always think, what could go wrong? How can we prevent it?
How often does the subject of unexplained phenomena come up when you're speaking to pilots or astronauts particularly? Is that something that you can have a conversation about? Are you expected to have a conversation about? You mentioned obviously being there at NASA as well. Do UFOs come up?
So people are very quiet if they're struggling with something, if it might affect them. So they will talk either hush hush or to their friends and colleagues. And that's why I was comparing the problem where we had ghosts in the cockpit, because they were afraid to speak up because they would have lost their job.
And it's interesting you hear, obviously, pilots being scared to report it. They don't want to lose career progression. They don't want to have their colleagues diminish them. They don't want to be laughed at.
We wrote a paper which has only just been approved. It took that long to get it down. We did have some conference papers, but this is an official white paper that's published on the website with our suggestions. As a team of experts, we even have a medical professional as part of the team. We have also air crew as part of that team who had their own experience of UAP while flying and were told not to do. So the people who actually went through the process themselves as aircrew. And often you do come across those experiences when people hear somebody else's and they say, oh, that makes sense. Now I can relate to what has happened. And but also our mind is very protective of us. But because the pilots are so alert and they're trained to watch more than you and I don't know if you fly, but if we are bound by Earth, we actually don't see objects when we get into the aircraft or when we are passengers. We scan like that. But the pilots don't have blinkers. They see, the sphere. They see the objects right round. But if you are cruising, for example, cross Atlantic or Pacific flight, you have time. So that's when you could look, towards Big Dipper, which is a lot of activities apparently could be happening around the Big Dipper. Choosing the person that you can tell authentically is the key.
So, from a cognitive psychology perspective, how reliable is human perception when observing or reporting extraordinary phenomena?
I'd say very reliable because these are experts observers. I think we're very gifted, I would say, or we're very lucky as community to have these experts sharing what they're seeing or experiencing.
But is there any element of preparing? This is very speculative, but what if they did come into contact with something non-human?
This is actual words of astronauts, is when they walk up to the rocket, they feel they're superheroes. They're better than superheroes. And during crisis, most important is not to freeze, because it's not flight or fight, it's freeze first. And by having that experience of mm, having knowing what to do, at least first three steps, or at least even one step would be sufficient to walk out from that freeze zone. Not just respond, but be effective in that, or efficient. We know now some of the phenomena interacts with us in feeling sense. So what do you do with that? We're not trained how to deal really with our experiences that flood us chemically, the emotions that we only train that ourselves throughout our life. But maybe fear is not even the problem. What if you're overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude and love and connection? And we know that with Jake Baber, who described that, and he felt that he's actually maybe not fit to fly.
And this is something we hear about when people are talking about non-human intelligence, UFOs and aliens, that perhaps entities are connected psychically, telepathically to a craft, and that's how they operate it.
You are so much above the ground suddenly, but you still connect to the ground and you still feel your feet or those little wheels still part of you connecting to the ground. You're almost feeling it with your feet because you're, I don't know, you're feeling the airframe moving. And that feeling makes you feel as if you are an aircraft. You have to go sit down and go through these touchdown landings, let them go wrong, get the crosswind, and slowly you will be coached when we're more like children in our perception, but not discounting our experience, of course, but seeing things for what they are. Then our mind doesn't color it. We've got very busy life, and we discount a lot of beauty as a result, because maybe dogs know what they all thinking. We don't know
Yep.
that still, right? So we don't know if for them it's strange that you and I can't read each other's thoughts, that they'll be standing in front of us and will have a completely different thing, thinking, and there'll be no crossover. And that feeling of having um, relaxation or exhalation came from is that every one of those particles or beings or light knew what all of us knew. I wish that people experience this feeling that you don't need to hide anything ever again. And we will all be so much better as humanity.
But other cultures, depending where you are in the world, don't see these ideas as being as silly or incredible as perhaps folks in the West would. And they're much more open to, well, yeah, these are just, you've got a physical reality and a non-physical reality, and you can access different elements of those. The idea that children don't arrive for us to shape them as adults, but for the children to shape us.
They're really asking us, does it really exist? Do you still believe in it? And it's a beautiful time to reevaluate, is that actually true? Having a child born, I would say it's probably similar for some people as having an overview effect for an astronaut. Because they change your reality of what matters. It's our opportunity to reevaluate and open our eyes to what the universe is actually like and what could we be like. And if we, hence our children are being born and astronauts going to space and extraordinary environments that we put ourselves in, the book is really a storytelling of these journeys of people, and it's touching different cultures and touching different phenomena on Earth, which we assume or take it for granted, because forcing somebody, in front of what they want to see, it could be devastating for them too. There is a reason why they don't want to hear it. So it's that much we don't know. And think of our volume of our mind. We don't even know where our mind is, where our thoughts rest. I would go into martial art mode in regards to not for defensiveness, but in terms of perceptual mode of listening, or maybe even better to say as a Korean medicine therapist, or as a breathwork, therapist, where I am purely present. Yes, yes. No, cephalopods, because they had a
That's
head.
the one, yeah.
Cephalopods, yeah. And she is just curious, exploring, and she removes, in a way, it's symbolic, but she removes all the gear that she's wearing to actually feel with her hands and be as she are.